Do you know what the best off-road car in the world is? No, it's not a Patrol. It's not a Wrangler. It's the Toyota 71. I was curious what a Land Cruiser like this looks like after 20 years of use. Let's take a tour together and we can evaluate it. If you have a Patrol, it will rust out and the engine will definitely fail at the crankshaft. All the Patrol guys who have a modified Patrol have a BMW engine instead. If you had a Toyota 71, you wouldn't have to worry about any of that. And if you had a Wrangler, the moment you bend the front axle, bend the front tie rod, and the car starts to rust, you'll also ask yourself if it wouldn't have been better to buy the 71 instead. Isn't it? This 71 has a 4.2-liter diesel engine. It's a non-turbo engine, which means it's no speeder. On the other hand, the torque is there right from the start, from idle. So you can get it going anytime, anywhere, with absolutely no problems. And off-road, it works really amazingly. Of course, if you expect it to be a highway express, it won't be. The upper limit for a reasonably comfortable drive is around 100 kilometers per hour. I was quite surprised that when I drove the 76 with the 4-liter gasoline engine, you can drive it just fine, easily 160 kilometers per hour. With the short one, with the 4.2 diesel, I don't think that's a good idea, and your cruising speed will be 100, 110. This particular one already has some tuning, which means the front heavy-duty bumper, I think by its shape it's an ARB, and in it a winch with a steel cable. Period correct auxiliary high beam lights. Nowadays, the trend is that if you have an off-roader with auxiliary high beam lights, they're some kind of LEDs. This is a beautiful retro piece, where you have huge auxiliary lights, and they have H1 bulbs in them. Beautiful. A period correct piece. Absolutely great. Next, as is standard on every proper LC70, there's an original snorkel, including the original Cyclone pre-cleaner, which ensures that not as much sand, dust, and so on gets into the intake. Also in the back is an aftermarket bumper from Fabryka 4x4 from Poland. This bumper has the advantage that you can have a really heavy spare tire on the car, and the bumper will support it. Another aftermarket item are these fender flares. Most 70 series don't have any flares, with the exception of some special editions. The most common reason for adding flares is to keep the wheels from sticking out of the body, in case you put on wider tires. On this car, since it's a short wheelbase, it's quite interesting that you can see a design specialty of the 70 series, which is that the front axle is wider than the rear axle. The wider front axle appeared when the facelift came out, when the front headlights stopped being round and started having this acrylic cover and a slightly different front-end shape. The reason for this is that, among other things, a V8 diesel engine could be installed in this car. And it didn't fit, so Toyota widened the axles. And on this particular model, the short 71, it looks really very interesting because since the car is short, the difference in width is really striking. If we look from the back, when you look from the back like this, you can see how the car looks funny on both sides, that it looks like it's driving sideways, but it's actually going straight because the wheels aren't directly behind each other. This little feature is great. When you're sitting inside, it looks like a gun sight. But what's special about this emblem, which I've never seen before, is that it's golden. That means it must have been driven by someone who likes expensive things. This is a great sign of retro. The antenna? If you don't pull it out, you won't hear anything on the radio. When was the last time you extended and retracted the antenna on your car? For me, it was probably sometime in 1999. If you look, the car is seemingly ugly in places. That's because since 2017, which is 8 years, there's been a green wrap on the car. The original color is a beautiful sandy yellow, which I find interesting because either it's a really bad job or the wrap doesn't last after 8 years. But this car, for the last 8 years, has been under a shelter for about 50% of the time. It's not exposed to the sun day in and day out. And yet, the wrap in many places on the car has done this. It has simply cracked and started to expose the original paint underneath. On the other hand, for someone looking for a well-preserved body, there's a high probability that if they manage to peel off the wrap properly, the paint underneath could be quite nice. Here you can see how the wrap is cracked and transitions to the original paint, which is here and is beautifully yellow and well preserved. Because it's the facelifted version, it no longer has leaf springs in the front, but coil springs. And what's interesting, what I really like, is a special detail. Here, the exhaust is routed from the engine. So the moment you drive through a puddle, it will create wonderful smoke effects as the water evaporates from the hot exhaust. And here you can see a small flaw. After all these years, the exhaust clamp has disappeared. And here in the back is a classic leaf spring, just like on old trucks. One would think that with leaf springs, it would be uncomfortable and bumpy and it wouldn't work. Sure, with this short model, you can really tell when you go over a bump that it bounces a little bit. But on a 76, for example, in combination with ARB shocks, it was a big surprise for me. It proved to be very useful for us in Morocco, and as you can see in the footage, even with the 76, he drove it literally like a beast, at speeds over 100 kilometers per hour. On a rocky, broken gravel road, and the car held beautifully. It didn't dance around, and it worked great. So when you have a 70 series, and you have this feeling that it's bumpy, ask at ARB, and you have a good chance to change the car's driving characteristics. Here I lay down under the car. The leaf spring caught my attention. At first, I thought the Toyota had made an evolution and added sliding pads to these leaf springs in newer versions. No, that's not the case. These sliding pads have been here from the beginning. And on this car, because it's 20 years old and at the beginning of its life, it was driven in the coal mine, the pads have disappeared a bit. If you look closely, there's still a gap here by the top leaf, and the pad is there. On the other leaves that are here, the pads have simply been ground down and have disappeared. The pads are there to keep the leaves from squeaking. So in this case, it will probably squeak from time to time. But it's no problem to take the leaf apart and put the pads back into the holes from above. On the 70 series, especially on this short one, the over-engineering of the chassis is beautifully visible. Do you see the size of that differential? It looks like a differential from a Tatra truck. And that's a big difference, for example, from a Wrangler, which has significantly smaller axles. And especially on the front axles of the Jeep Wrangler JK, the axles would bend on the lower spec models. Here on the 70 series, I don't know what you'd have to do to bend that axle, because its profile and massiveness are on a completely different level. If you look at the construction of these axles and the whole car, including the frame, you'll understand why, in developing countries, they use these cars as chassis. For carrying heavy machine guns, anti-aircraft systems, and so on. Because the car can simply take it. Can you imagine what launching a rocket from a car like this does? The car just takes it and drives away. I can't imagine that on some modern plastic pickup. Anyone interested in shooting rockets from such a chassis should watch the movie Black Hawk Down. Most off-road vehicles have their tanks somewhere between the axles. In the case of the 70 series, specifically this 71, the tank is located behind the rear axle. It's here. And right from the factory, it has a relatively massive, I think about a 2mm steel plate on it. So if you hit the ground with the tank, absolutely nothing will happen. And you can see it. The car served for many years in the coal mines. Then it served on. It's 20 years old. And do you see any signs of damage on the tank? Not at all. Quiz question. Do you know what this is for? Well, take a guess. In every car, when you want to turn on the heat, you need to get air inside. And that air also has to escape somewhere. In most cars, the vent is hidden under the rear bumper. Here on the Toyota 71, it's on the side like this. So when you're heating the car, the stale, cold air escapes through here. Or also, when you slam the door, the car blows the air out through here so the doors can close properly. And by the way, closing the doors on the 71. The sound of the doors, it's just awesome, like closing a tank. Now I'm lying by the front axle. I'm a former Wrangler owner, and one of the first mods you do is to put a proper cover on the differential. On the 71, it's not necessary. This front side here is so massive that there's no need to add any extra metal. You'd have to be driving through something completely ridiculous, a brutal quarry full of sharp, solid granite rocks, for it to make sense to add any more metal. On a Wrangler, there's just a sheet metal cover. So points for the 71 again. What does the axle on a Wrangler look like? Measure the diameter of this tube, and then compare it to how it looks here on the 71. When you look at the angular shape, the size, and the massiveness, it's a completely different dimension than, say, a Wrangler. This is a panhard rod. And here, unlike the Wrangler, the panhard rod is perfectly level. What does that mean? The moment you go over bumps, the car doesn't dance from side to side as much as, say, a Wrangler. A typical problem with the Wrangler is that when you lift it and don't adjust the panhard rods, the car not only moves up and down when going over every bump, but it also moves side to side as the panhard rod describes an arc. In the case of this car, because the front panhard rod is perfectly straight and it has leaf springs in the back, you can barely feel it. What's up here? This is the steering rod, the so-called pusher, which transfers the forces from the steering wheel to the axle so that the wheels turn right and left. Compared to the Wrangler, this rod is significantly higher, so when you're driving, you'll hit something with this bumper much sooner than you'd hit the rod. Actually, all of these rods, both the panhard and the draglink, are higher than the front bumper. So the probability of bending them, unlike on a Jeep, is minimal. See the steering knuckles? There are no ball joints here. The only joints are on the tie rods. And here you can see the steering tie rod. You won't bend that, because if you were to bend it, the rock would first have to get past the front axle, and only then would it hit the steering tie rod. At which point you'd have long been stopped by the axle on that rock. And the axle mounting is similar to the Patrol. There's a huge arm with two bushings, on which the axle is mounted, and the axle can't move like this, or rather, only as much as the bushings allow. Whereas on a Wrangler, there are 4 arms, which means there are twice as many bushings, and the risk of play developing is much higher. So again, the 71's design. Here you can see how far the massive front arm is mounted to the frame with another bushing. Well, since I'm already rolling around under the car, do you see that? On the frame, there is only and exclusively surface corrosion, but no deep corrosion is happening here. I'm very surprised myself how well preserved this car looks after 20 years of service in mines, in the forest, and on construction sites. I'm really amazed. And if I compare it to a Patrol, for example, that one would be rotted like paper by now. Do you see that skid plate? And it's there precisely so that when you roll over somewhere on your belly, you don't damage this transfer case. And over the years, the skid plate isn't even slightly bent. Let's open the engine bay, and you can clearly see the original sand color of this 71. The engine is an inline-6, 4.2 diesel, a perfect, indestructible piece of machinery. It's controlled in a beautifully old-fashioned way. Nice and simple, with a cable from the gas pedal directly to the pump. There are simple injectors here. Here you can clearly see the mechanical control with a throttle cable right to the pump. There's nothing to go wrong with that. And in those 20 years, if this wasn't a Toyota but a Patrol, you would have seized the crankshaft 4 or 5 times and wouldn't have gotten anywhere. With this car, there's no need to fix anything. A 4.2 naturally aspirated diesel, an immortal thing. This is also a nice retro feature, a bucket filter with a huge air filter. Here's the air conditioning, and what's interesting about it is that the engine fan is only on a viscous coupling, and there's no additional fan at the front like on other cars. So the fan is more or less trouble-free, and the air conditioning, even though there's only one fan, works perfectly reliably. Which, by the way, all the sheikhs in the United Arab Emirates can confirm. Over there in the back, you can see the retrofitted control module for the winch. I really like that it's nicely hidden, not sticking out anywhere on the front bumper. It's just hidden inside under the hood, and it looks very professional. A great technical detail is this valve with the blue Bowden cable. When the driver pulls the heater lever in the car, a cable moves that valve over there, and that causes the valve to open and let hot water from the engine into the heater core. And suddenly, you'll have heat in the car. Beautiful, old-school mechanics. There's nothing to go wrong with it. And if it were to break, you just connect the hose and you'll have heat. And in the summer, you can just cap it off again. But that valve has been here for 20 years and it hasn't broken down yet. So let's take a look inside to see what a 71 from 2006 looks like after 20 years of use. See the interior? A beautiful retro piece. Personally, I was impressed by the condition of the seats. Considering they've been worked in for 20 years, there's just a small crack in this spot, and on the passenger seat, the fabric is slightly separated at the seam. Otherwise, the wear and tear on the material itself is completely unnoticeable. Of course, there are places where the age shows a little. If you look around the gas pedal, the carpet isn't what it used to be. But that's probably forgivable after 20 years. For example, here on the pedals, you can clearly see technical details that are hidden somewhere under plastic in other cars. And when I press the clutch, like this, do you see the return spring that brings the clutch pedal back up? Here. These springs are, of course, in all other cars, but here you can actually see them. A pretty interesting feature is the steering wheel adjustment. I move this here, and I can adjust the steering wheel however I want. It's not a car, it's a machine. A great detail. Here you have instructions on how to use the differential lock. And the differential lock itself is controlled here under the steering wheel with this knob. Now it's off. When I turn it like this, I've engaged the rear, and when I turn it here, I've engaged both differential locks. At that point, the car will climb a wall. Another technical detail is this ventilation outlet. This way, you can direct the ventilation wherever you need it. And if you don't like the airflow, you can turn it to close it completely. The fan and air conditioning controls are also interesting. Here is the knob that controls the fan. And around it is a ring that controls the intensity of the air conditioning. And then, like in an old car, you mechanically use a cable to set which direction the hot or cold air will blow into the cabin. And if I want to close the inner flap to avoid smells from outside, again, it's a mechanical lever. You hear that? How it clicked? How the flap closed? And now it's open again. Caution. After leaving difficult terrain, disengage the differential locks and disengage the 4x4 drive. That's what's beautiful about it. It's simply a work machine. This is how you start the car. No digital stuff. Pure mechanics. I'll turn it. I'll put it in neutral. It's a 4.2 diesel. It's cold. I has to preheat it. Did you hear that? On the first try, even after all these years. And when I want to turn the car off, I turn it off. And now, to be able to take the key out, I have to press this button, and only then can I turn it and take it out. Without pressing this button, you can't take it out. I'll show you when I put it in. See how it popped up? And now I can't turn the key out. I have to press it and take it out. How about that? Another thing you don't usually see in cars anymore is a manual throttle. See this little wheel? When I turn it like this, listen. Did you hear how it increased the revs? This is useful when you want to use it as cruise control and drive slowly across a field at a constant, stable speed. Or when you need to use the winch and want the alternator to charge with more energy. So you just turn the wheel here to add more, and it increases the idle speed, just as you need. Or, on the contrary, you can reduce it. Wonderful. And in the back, when I look, you can see that the car is in a 2+4 configuration. That means 2 people in the front and 4 people on the back seats. What's interesting is that the registration says that the 4 people in the back can only be transported occasionally. I'll show you how the seats fold. There's a strap here. I pull it, fold it out, and I'm sitting. Another person can sit next to me, and 2 more across from me. Well, to be honest, like sitting here and driving somewhere far, I wouldn't want to do that. But to drive a short distance to the woods or around the site to an excavator, no problem. See how much headroom I have? If I drive like this and the car is bouncing a bit, it won't be the most comfortable. And I'll probably have to sit like this and just hope I don't kick the others. I like the primitive way this seat is secured. It holds in place, and since only the upholstery here is touching, it won't even make any rattling noises. Well, and when it's folded down, a pallet of some material can easily fit in here. So let's go for a ride. All right, let's go for a drive. Let's start it up. First, the glow plugs. Starts on the first try. What's interesting about this car is the engine. You can tell it's more of a truck engine. So it's a slow revving diesel. It doesn't matter what RPM you're at. The car just gets going with no problem at all. The first thing that caught my attention when I got in the car and drove the first few kilometers was the steering wheel. Do you see how much I have to turn the steering wheel just to make a turn? What's really interesting is that you actually turn it very lightly. No great force is needed. It does have power steering, but when I need to turn, like right now, you need to turn the steering wheel quite a lot. See that? But what's great is that because this 71 is short, you can turn it in an incredibly small space with no problem at all, because its turning radius is really huge. The engine is a truck type. You don't need to rev it at all, and it pulls nicely right from idle. Even the way it handles is really very similar to any kind of truck. Its disadvantage in this car is that it's quite loud. When I compare it to my friend's 76, which has a 4-liter gasoline engine, that gasoline engine runs beautifully smooth, and it's pleasant in the car. Here, the truck-style diesel is simply unmistakable. On the other hand, considering its durability, you just forgive it. Because it's a 71, the short version, it took me a while to get used to the short wheelbase, in the sense that whenever I go over a bump, the second axle goes over it very quickly. This means that the car feels very bouncy, because you can really feel that short wheelbase. Hop, hop, there I go. Okay, now we'll go over a small bump, and you'll see nicely how it bounces. 1, 2. It's incredibly fast. And now we're approaching a speed bump. Here you'll see clearly how the car, because it's short, bounces incredibly fast. It's incredible to me. The missing meter of length makes a huge difference in the car's behavior. I have to say, you can feel that short wheelbase on paved roads, on the highway and so on. It's unpleasant. But the moment I'm driving off-road like this, it's actually no problem at all. Otherwise, handling this car is very surprising to me because everything is so easy, but at the same time, it's mechanically very clear what gear you're in because it clicks into place unambiguously. Where it is, it is. You don't have to search for it. For example, I remember when I was reviewing the Buchenka, I was never sure what gear I was actually in. But here, the shifting is absolutely precise, even though it's just a workhorse. However, if you want to get this car, I recommend a test drive first, because with this engine, the noise is just there and there's no denying it. Anyone sensitive to noise should probably choose the gasoline version. I'm currently going 80 kilometers per hour, and I already have to speak pretty loudly for you to hear me clearly. Otherwise, at speeds up to, let's say, 80 kilometers per hour, the car is surprisingly nimble. Above 80, it's not so nimble anymore. What's really nice about this car is that you sit a lot higher than everyone else, and that sight on the hood gives you a sense of importance. Okay, now I'm trying to accelerate a bit. You can see the car isn't super fast, but it's not super slow either. The Toyota 71. After a few drives, I understood that as a toy, this is an absolutely brilliant machine. It's definitely not for everyone, because with its short wheelbase and this 4.2 diesel engine, driving it long distances will be a bit of a grind. Because it has a short wheelbase, the car will tend to wander a bit on the highway. And the 4.2 diesel, the way it's geared in this car, is definitely not meant for highway speeds. You can really tell this car is a workhorse, designed for mines, quarries, forests, and other hard-to-reach places, where the car moves around like it's right at home. When you take it on the highway, it doesn't feel as comfortable there, because with its short wheelbase and that slow-revving diesel engine, the car just isn't, it can't comfortably reach the modern speeds we're all used to. Forget about going 160 or more in this short wheelbase model. It's complete nonsense. For that, you'd be better off buying the 76. But if you want an unstoppable legend that will drive through absolutely anything off-road and withstand everything, then this is definitely the right choice.